Do you ever have these kind of questions or doubts when taking a decision in your life, and sometimes you feel that you are not taking the best decision in the endeavors that you are hmm, attempting in your life, in order your goals, in the projects that you have? Many times we feel that we are lost in a big sea of information, and we have these struggling mechanisms in our brain that disrupt the way we are thinking and the way we are designing our lives. So we have a system that goes into the future signal, which can trigger anxiety, and that's why many people also develop anxiety by not being able to decide what is the best choice, whether it's in your work, whether it's in your personal life, or whether it is on a big decision that you have to take. So there is a hard coherence in this process that we can develop, and that we can start using the energy and the frequency of the earth and the heart in order to generate these kind of expansive waves of intuition. And then by doing that, we will arrive to a conscious evaluation. All of this process is the system and the way that we are going to discover in this episode, if you stay until the end, so that you can have the strategies to tap into the power of your intuition, that it's going to replace the rationality that we have lived with. So stay tuned, and please pay attention to every message that I'm going to give you, because you will understand perfectly how the frequencies work and why many times you activate your anxiety. So let's go with this information. The first thing that we are going to talk about is this somatic divide between panic and intuition. We have two responses, as I previously mentioned. We have the anxious response, we have the reactive mode, the survival mode, which is made of this neurological driver, which is the amygdala, that is the low road of threat detection. This amygdala is frantically demanding for immediate relief from the hypothetical threats. So we many times create these threats that are not even real. And this is the first mechanism that activates a fearful response or this anxiety. Then, what is the biochemical profile? How does it look? Well, we have the activation of the HPA axis that I have spoken several times, and we release the continuous surges of cortisol and adrenaline. By doing that, you are already putting your nervous system in the sympathetic mode. And then we have the somatic sensation. How do you feel in your body when you are in this anxious or survival response? Well, you have a racing heart, you have a pressure in your stomach, you feel a knot in your stomach, you start sweating, and you have intense muscle tension, and that's why you arrive into the night and you can't even rest. Now, there is a different frequency where you can start living now, and this is the intuitive signal of the subconscious pattern recognition of heuristics that allows you to scan for the real things that are happening, for anomalies based on the past learning, for things that you have already learned. And that's why it's important that every mistake you make, you learn from it, and you don't stay in this failure mode or this fearful mode. Now, what happens in the biochemical profile with you have this intuitive signal mode? The vagus nerve, as I previously have mentioned, and I will make an episode about the science of the vagus nerve, acts as a biological counterbalance, releasing regulatory neurotransmitters like serotonin and oxytocin and many others that are being triggered in your microbiota. Now, what happens in the body? The somatic sensations. You feel a quiet, steady knowing. You know what to do. You know that you don't need to react. You generate a response. And a subtle stomach cue or easing of this physical tension with lower blood pressure is what happens within your body. And that's how you start processing all of the signals from your body and then translating that language into something that makes you feel that you are smart, that you are intelligent, and that you are taking the best decision, even without too much thinking. So now, after that, you generate a frequency, and this is just how amazing our bodies are and how we need to start tapping into the wisdom of our bodies that are synchronizing with nature and with the earth. Because here is the big um, key part of this episode. Point 1 hertz is the biological frequency of clarity. It's also the biological frequency of the earth. So the oscillator, which is your heart, the heart generates this electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than the brain. So it is a lot more powerful, your heart, to generate these frequencies, and you start generating positive emotions, driving the cardiovascular, the nervous, and the immune system to synchronize all of these systems at exactly zero point 0.1 hertz, which is the resonant frequency. This is also known as the divine frequency, and this is how your soul aligns with your heart coherent frequency. Now, we have a T0 frequency, which is the brain that finally receives the process the cognitive evaluation and the assessment of what is happening. The speed of your intuition, and pay attention to this, this is the minus 1.5 seconds. The heart receives the intuitive environmental information and alters its rhythm. So 1.5 seconds before your brain has the picture, you already have the information through your heart. And minus 3 to 5 seconds, there is an environmental event or a future stimulus that initiates this response. That's why this is called the um, the divine frequency, because all of this information is in the field that we are cohabitating, that the collective is creating. And if you tap into the right frequency of this zero point 0.1 hertz and you synchronize with the earth, you start breathing, you start developing these intuition skills, you will have a lot more access to the information from this field. You will pull the information before, and then your body will translate this through the heart, expanding the waves or expanding the waves, and then generating the full picture for the brain to start taking the decision. But you will make it a lot better than using the rational way of thinking. So now, the brain's hardware for navigating uncertainty has three layers, and we will go in each one and explaining what happens. The input layer, the interoception, this is the somatic markers, and these are the slight changes in the heart activity or the gut responses, and they are projected upward into the cortex as we saw before. The body receives first the information. This information travels through the heart. The heart expands the information, and then you receive it in the brain. Now, what happens in the processing mechanisms? Well, there is a central area, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex that utilizes these bodily markers to rapidly calculate the subjective value of your choices. So, what is happening is, is that your brain is quickly processing these markers, interpreting the signals of the body, and it encodes early signatures of confidence and rejects the disadvantageous outcomes instantly, entirely bypassing the slow analytical reasoning. So you already know, you don't have to think twice. And that's why many times, this happened to me several times when I was presenting any kind of exam, or when I was giving a presentation or a talk or whatever it was the experience where I needed to process certain knowledge and I didn't have too much time to rationalize the response. Well, those were my best moments, because usually the first answer in an exam or in an interview or in whatever process that you need quickly to access the information comes from your intuition. So that's why you shouldn't correct your first choices when you take an exam. So the system failure, what happens when you are damaging this processing system? Well, the damage to this prefrontal cortex region severely impairs this biological compass. The individual is left blind to the future consequences, acting with high impulsivity and completely failing to develop the gut feelings required to navigate complex and risky scenarios. This is what happens when you don't trust in you. This is what happens when you need to overthink the responses, when you try to analyze too much things. And by doing that, what you are creating is damage to this prefrontal region, and you are impairing your intuitive system of information. And we don't want that. Although we have been taught to do that through the school systems, which are extremely archaic, we now arrive into a new era where this is going to be the distinction between the AI that is just giving the responses through analyzing patterns and the content and the algorithms and all of this information, and you. AI will never have this intuitive power. AI will never be able to access the field of information. It will be able to access whatever it was created into this stream of the internet and the sea of knowledge that is around there. But it is not able to pick up the signals from nature, from the earth, and from all of those systems. And this is the big distinction that is going to come, and that is already here in the generations of today. The small children that we have today, that they are in elementary school or in high school, they are really rejecting the old system because it doesn't align with them. They want to think intuitively. They want to be trapped by something that makes sense, not by something that is just memorized, and they don't even see why is this information for me or why is it important. It is now a new era where we need to develop these intuitive skills. So what happens in how we deviate our information, and what happens with this modern cognitive chatter? Well, there is a path of the soul compass, and living a soul-led life requires stepping away from external validation and not caring about what this linear structure of the society has been manipulating you to want the same things that everybody else. So by trusting the quiet, persistent nudges of intuition, the individuals align with their core values, and they yield deep peace, even when facing difficult, high stake choices. So, this is the difference between the individuals that are just following the crowd and following what it is supposed to be done or what society expects from them, and all of this messaging. Now, the force of the magnetic deviance works by frightening mental narratives. The news, for example, insecurities by being judged by everybody in social media, for example, and a constant loop of what if. What if, and how these what ifs act as a magnetic deviance is the key to start detaching from this program that you are being imbued every day and being manipulated by. This cognitive chatter pulls the individual violently away from their biological compass, and they drive them into chronic autonomic dysregulation, which causes stress, and eventually it causes burnout. And what happens when we are under stress? Well, you can think, you take the worst decisions, you follow the crowd, and you follow the steps that you are being told to follow, and then you find out that you are empty, that you are missing something, that your life has not been lived in the way you wanted. And if you are lucky, probably you realize this conflict by the time that you are 35, 40, 45, 50. If you are not that lucky, you will arrive until your 60s or 70s and realize that you have been living the life that other people wanted you to live, and you are frustrated. Still, there is time, and you can switch and change what you are doing with your life. So, this is the messaging. Now we have a different path to take. Now we can escape from this matrix that is pulling us into this chatter of dividing us and making us just feel lonely and more disrupted. Now, what happens? Why is this mechanism being activated? Well, we have a working memory that collapses under the digital overload. The top of the funnel, the deluge of information, is how modern workflows relentlessly bombard employees, fracturing sustained, selective, and divided attention. So you receive a bunch of information. The average daily load consists of 117 emails and 153 chat messages. Imagine that kind of information. And this is, I think, just being optimistic, because I think that many people receive more than that. And imagine receiving this kind of information, you can't process the amount of information. So there is a bottleneck, and there is a Miller's law. The brain's working memory acts as a mental data cache with a strict, inflexible limit of 7 minus and plus 2 more, so more or less 9 or 5 items at any given time. So if you can just process either 9 or 5 items at a time, and you are receiving more or less 260 or 270 items, how are you going to process all of this information? Well, there is the bottom of the funnel, which is how the system crashes. And when the limit is exceeded, the cognitive overload triggers. And then the result is the analysis paralysis, and people feel frustrated. There is a severe spike in errors and declining of productivity. And this is what happens in most of the office jobs. Most of the companies do this with their employees. They frustrate them until the limit, and they just really, really feel depleted, empty, and they feel that they are not doing anything important in their own lives. So the overwhelmed brain triggers a sympathetic fight or flight, which raises the cortisol response and completely shutting off the access to the biological intuition. How are you going to access the biological intuition if you are not thinking, if you are receiving a huge amount of information, that many of this information is also repetitive, it doesn't make any sense, and it is just bureaucratic overload. Now, finally, let's arrive to how we are going to solve this process. Well, this is the amazing science of our brains. There is a transient hyperfrontality that unlocks the peak intuitive flow. The state one, which is the cognitive grind, if you stay in this survival mode, there is a hyper analytical and heavily reliant on the prefrontal cortex for continuous self monitoring and anxious responses and sequential thinking. And these states leads to rapid decision fatigue and massive vulnerability to digital overload. So this is what happens when you are constantly watching the news, constantly accessing these platforms, these social platforms, and just scrolling or watching these very short videos that nowadays they are even being judged and criticized, and there are going to be a lot of consequences for these short videos because they are damaging the brain of the people and hijacking their attention and also making them suffer. Now, if we shift, the shift is the transient hypofrontality. And what is this? This is the balancing of the challenge and starting to develop skills. The prefrontal cortex temporarily deactivates. And by deactivating this over-analytic mode, the biological dimmer switch is engaged, and you enter into removing the self-conscious monitoring and the anxious self-doubt and this reactive mode or the sympathetic nervous system responses, and then you have space to develop the state 2. You move and you access the frequencies of nature, the frequencies of the earth, and then you arrive in and you enter into this intuitive flow. And this is effortless focus that is generated through continuous frictionless feedback from the task itself. And we have seen this state in so many examples of life. So many people enter into these states. Writers, when you are writing anything that you have a passion to write for, you access this flow. Athletes, we have seen Olympic athletes entering into this flow and achieving extremely physical breakthroughs. And this intuitive mode operates bypassing the working memory limits, and you have unlimited skills, boosting the overall productivity by 250% to 500% while maintaining deep, authentic inner peace. When you are in the flow, when you are in the zone, when you are doing the things that you are supposed to do, when you listen to your soul, when you listen to your body, when you start trusting and developing more skills so that your heart can process and expands the wave of information through this intuitive mode, then you step into a new dimension, which is the one that is going to prevail among this chaos. And we want to stimulate that with this kind of knowledge. And this is why I'm explaining the science behind the mystical behind the metaphysics and behind everything that these doubters or these people want you to follow the thread of the, let's say, the crowd, and just following what other people is doing. So if you want to break the mold and you really want to step out of this matrix and you want to experience this peace, these frequencies, what you have to do is listening to your soul. By doing that, by knowing how to listen to your body, how to access these frequencies, you will start developing a compass within your brain, within your heart, within your body that is going to give you the confirmation that you are in the right path. You will feel full, you will feel fulfilled, you will feel that you are contributing to society, you will feel bonded with many other people that you will start resonating and attracting, and many other things are going to happen. And one of them is also that you are accessing an abundance frequency, and you will start attracting opportunities to you instead of just chasing them. So I hope that this video has enlightened you and has give you the science cues that you need to understand what is this mystical realm of how your soul is speaking to you, how you access this field of information, and how the flow of information goes through your heart, expands and multiplies the amount of information that you can receive. Thank you very much for listening. And remember, I'm just asking one favor from you. Give me a like, give me a comment, give me a question, suggest a topic, or suggest a guest that I can interview. And also subscribe to the channel so that the algorithm knows that this information is extremely important. And also give me a like in the video so that the algorithm also thinks, and let's use this intuitive science and just share this video with everyone that you feel that they can start knowing more about themselves. Thank you very much for being here. See you in the next episode. Bye.